Here are all the topics covered in the US political parties revision video. This video will focus on comparing party dominance and third parties in both the UK and the US. There are many crossovers with the elections and the election system with the UK and US political parties. Some elements of this part of the revision video will be covered in the elections revision video. Now let's look at the structural aspect of third party dominance. The use of the first-past-the-post system for most elections in both countries cements the two-party grip on elected office and political power. Laws concerning ballot access often make it very hard for candidates from third parties to get on the ballot in the first place in the US. The lack of a national election system often translates into a significant handicap for smaller parties, as many states have particularly high thresholds. The third-party presidential candidate filing fee for Oklahoma for 2020 was a staggering $35,000. The requirements in the UK are far lower and simpler, with all candidates requiring a £500 deposit and a nomination form signed by just 10 voters. Another obstacle for third-party candidates and independents in the USA is how the televised presidential debates are structured. To qualify for a debating slot, a candidate must poll on average of at least 15% in 5 designated polls. This creates a catch-22 scenario. Third-party candidates and independents need the added publicity of participation in such debates to grow their support and visibility, yet lack of television exposure means that they usually fail to register in high polling numbers. Now we have the rational aspect. The dominance of two-party system in the USA creates its own reinforcement. Even high-profile, independently minded candidates such as Trump and Sanders, who conceivably could run outside the Democrat and Republican parties, choose instead to run for the nomination in one of the two parties. The existence of primaries and how they operate increases this incentive to run under a mega-party label. With its emphasis on personalities, the individual platforms and direct appeals to the voters, the primary system attracts a wide spectrum of candidates vying for nominations at all levels, who frequently owe little to the central party organisation. It sometimes appears as if US parties are comprised of huge swathes of independent political operatives, each with their own donor base, campaign team and particular message. This is still reflected in the weaker party unity often seen on issues in Congress, despite the rise in hyperpartisanship. By contrast, without a primary system, the UK holds far more attraction for candidates to seek election for parties other than Labour and Conservative. When parties' defections occur, they frequently involve the Liberal Democrats. Many disaffected UK politicians feel it makes sense politically and morally to leave one of the main parties and plough their political furrow elsewhere. There is also the sense that in both political systems that it makes rational sense to vote for one of the two main parties in order not to waste one's vote. This is even truer in the US, where every state is essentially a two-party contest at both the state and national level. In the UK, while for the majority of constituents there are Labour and Conservative election battlegrounds, in many constituencies there is scope for tactical voting, which can benefit third parties and especially the Liberal Democrats. This topic links with the section in the first part of the comparative video and is probably one of the sharpest contrasts between the UK and US party systems. In summary, third parties are far more significant in the UK, while independents are more important in the US. UK politics has traditionally attracted greater support for third parties than is the case in the USA. In the 2019 UK general election, the two main parties received a combination vote share of just over 75% and won 87% of the seats, which enabled the Conservatives to enjoy a healthy working majority of 80%. By contrast, the 2020 presidential election saw a combined vote share for Trump and Biden of 98%, with no third party winning a single state. Yet the return in the UK to two-party politics witnessed in 2019 was a departure from the three previous elections, 2010, 2015 and 2017, in which neither of the two main parties won a strong majority. During 2010 to 2015 and 2017 to 2019, third parties held the balance of power and therefore had considerable importance. Now let's look at the balance of power. Third parties have in recent times held the balance of power. This resulted in a formal coalition government between the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats in 2010 to 2015. In addition, the Liberal Democrats also had a hand in policy direction, though the referendum on the alternative vote system and the scrapping of Labour's previous plans for compulsory ID cards. During May's minority government, a less formal confidence and supply agreement was entered into the Northern Ireland Democratic Unionist Party, or the DUP. Among other things, the deal secured an extra £1 billion worth of funding for Northern Ireland and an ongoing agreement by the Conservatives to safeguard the Union. There is no historic parallel for this in the US, where control of Congress has always rested with one of the two main parties, often with one chamber controlled by one party and the other controlled by its opponents. This requires a different approach to political compromise if legislation is to be passed. The incentive among legislators is to try and secure bipartisanship support, but third parties are entirely excluded from this process. Nor is there any equivalent to national elections won by third party, such as the success in 2019 of the Brexit Party, the final European elections involving the UK. Now let's look at the representation of third parties. In devolved assemblies with their different electoral system, the two main parties struggle to dominate. In Northern Ireland, the party system is entirely different, with neither main party having any representation. In Wales and Scotland, the nationalist parties are significant players, and the Scottish government is dominated by the SNP, albeit often as a minority government. Given the growth in powers of the devolved assemblies, third parties are additionally significant in these institutions. By contrast, no state government in the USA deviates from the norm of two-party control. One has to look deep and hard for examples of third-party candidates elected to major office, even at a state level. One example was the pledge of Lowell Whitaker in his 1992 campaign by independent candidate Ross Perot to eliminate the federal budget deficit, subsequently adopted by both main parties. In 2019, the Democrats adopted the Green Party's New Deal with its emphasis on tackling climate change and carbon emissions. This arguably lessened the distinctive appeal of the Greens, leading to the loss of potential votes for them. Now we have securing votes. There is little incentive for potential candidates in the US to run outside the two-party system, with the main party's traditional broad appeal and looser central structure. Where third parties and independents ironically have their main significance in US politics is as a spoiler. Occasionally, they can spoil the chances of a party winning an election by siphoning off a few crucial votes, and thereby handing victory to their rival. The highest profile example of this occurred in the 2000 presidential election, when Green candidate Rolf Nader won enough left-leaning votes in Florida to spoil the chances of Democrat Al Gore leaving George W. Bush to take the presidency. When we look at the crucial battleground states in the 2016 and 2020 elections, third parties took more votes in 3 Rust Belt swing states than the winning margins of the 2 victorious candidates. There is evidence in the UK too of votes for a third party clearly determining the outcome in the election, often in a way that voters might regret. In 2019, former Labour leader Ed Miliband, with strongly Remain, clung on to his seat in the Doncaster North, with a majority of around 2,000 votes over the Conservatives, while the Brexit Party came third with over 8,000 votes, therefore spoiling the result for the pro-Brexit cause. Although third parties and independents are far less important in US politics, a case can be made that independents are occasionally more prominent in the US. First, many US third parties are focused on their founder, already a high-profile politician having originally been elected from one of the main parties. Therefore, although having a former third-party label, in reality they ran as independents and not the nominee of an established third party. In 2020, the 2 senators not formally affiliated with either main party are Angus King of Maine and Bernie Sanders of Vermont, who were officially elected as independents, although both enjoy close relations with the Democrat Party. Sanders ran for the Democrat nomination in 2015 and 2019, and both men have caucused for the Democrats. Neither face significant Democrat opposition in their Senate races. By contrast, very few true independents are elected in the UK, and when they are, it is normally because at least one other party has stood down for them. Former BBC reporter Martin Bell stood and won in the 1997 as an independent in the safe Conservative seat of Tatton. Neither Labour nor the Liberal Democrats contested the seat, which helped him to victory. Party politics dominates the UK political landscape, as it does in the US, with the additional obstacle in the US being that wealthy individuals wishing to run as independents are unable to spend unlimited amounts on their campaign. Third parties and independents have considerably more influence and significance in the UK in terms of both electoral success and influence in policy making. The US lacks the established viable third parties that stand much more of a chance of winning at major elected offices.